Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a video on a topic that I'm really excited to talk about, particularly because it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite trope in pretty much any genre that I read, but particularly fantasy and sci-fi. And that is the role that merchants, banks and commerce play in these worlds. When we typically think of fantasy, we usually imagine the obvious things: swords, dragons, prophecies, and also grand battles. But here's the thing, behind every single war, every kingdom, every empire, there is money. Who pays for the armies? Who controls the trade routes? Who builds the ships, funds the temples, or decides whether your king can go to war at all? That side of fantasy, the economics, the merchants, the bankers, doesn't get talked about as much, though I will say I have seen more series coming out like this, but we can have more. And it is just as rich, just as dramatic, and just as magical as the sword and sorcery side of things. So today I'm going to dive into fantasy about banks, merchants, and commerce, books that show us how money moves through worlds and how it quietly and decisively shapes history. Because let's be honest, that is also the case in the real world. All you have to do is follow the money, particularly when you look at what is going on in the world today. All you have to do is follow the money. I'm going to split this video into two parts, books and series that I have read, and then I'm also going to talk about books and series that are on my TBR because there are so many. First off, we're going to start with The Just City by Jo Walton. Now, this is the first book in a trilogy, but you can read the first book as a standalone. And this is, I would say, a mixture of sci-fi and fantasy. There are some kind of sci-fi fantasy mashups in this list as well. And this is a book that isn't just about banks in a traditional sense. There are no merchants haggling in markets, no guilds vying for power. Instead, it's about economics at the most basic structural level. What does it take to run a utopia? In The Just City, the goddess Athene gathers philosophers, thinkers and curious minds from across time to build Plato's Republic. Literally. They try to create an ideal society with justice and wisdom at its heart. But Walton is very clever about it. She shows us how much hidden labour it takes to sustain a utopia. Who grows the food? Who maintains the city? Who counts, stores and distributes the resources that let philosophers spend their time philosophizing? This is where the economics creeps in. The novel doesn't lecture about banks, but it constantly reminds us that philosophy and ideals can't exist without an underlying economy. Even in a world with gods and magic, someone still has to till the fields. And that's why it needs to be on this list, because The Just City dramatizes the hidden economy behind ideals. It makes us notice the structures, labor, surplus, trade, that fantasy often takes for granted. The next one is the Dagger and the Coin series by Daniel Abraham. At the time that I'm filming this video, I am 2 books in and I am loving it. Part of the reason why is because I think this series is one of the best examples of what I'd call epic financial strategy, even just 2 books in. It has the kingdoms and armies you expect from epic fantasy, but at its heart is a bank, the Median Bank. What makes this series brilliant is how Abraham takes something as seemingly dry as paper money and turns it into a world-shaping innovation. The Median Bank issues currency backed by trust, and suddenly entire empires are dependent on contracts and ledgers. Armies can't march without credit. Trade collapses if confidence falters. And then you've got the characters. We have one character who is a banker's apprentice at the start of the series, but she becomes a fascinating lens into finance. She's clever, ambitious, and constantly learning how to wield money. As we have another character who reinvents herself by understanding politics and economics better than her peers. And then we have another character who is a tragic, paranoid man whose rise to power shows what happens when politics and banking collide with unchecked ego. The Dagger and the Coin shows us how financial institutions can be much more powerful than kings. Abraham makes contracts feel like weapons and banks feel like fortresses. It's fantasy that takes economics seriously without losing an ounce of the drama. Next up, we have one of my favorite books on this list, and obviously I can't compile a list talking about banking without mentioning this book because it is one of the best books to talk about this topic, and that is The Folding Knife by KJ Parker. And I have to say, I think this might be the purest banking fantasy novel I've ever read. The hero, or you could also call him the anti-hero, isn't a warrior or a wizard. He's Basso, a banker and a statesman, and he's one of my favorite characters of all time. Through Basso's eyes, we see everything that usually happens in the background of fantasy: trade reforms, public works, tax policy, investments. But Parker makes it so gripping because he shows how these things build and sustain empires just as surely as armies. Bato himself is also one of the most well-written characters I have ever read. He's smart, he's charismatic, and he's ruthlessly pragmatic. He's also deeply flawed, prone to hubris, and Parker doesn't shy away from showing how a single miscalculation can ripple across an entire society. The Folding Knife is about the magic of systems. I mean, there isn't a ton of magic in this book, if any at all, to be honest. But Parker treats finance itself as though it's like sorcery. It's invisible, it's powerful, and it's incredibly fragile. He proves you can write a fantasy novel where the drama comes entirely from economics and it's still just as tense as any sword and sorcery fantasy book or any battlefield scene. The next two that I'm going to talk about, I've only read part of the series and I was lukewarm, but I think it's still worth mentioning because I think both of these series are also very loved by a lot of people. So the first one is the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb. This is a series where economics isn't abstract, it's visceral, emotional, and also tied to family. The Vestrit family are merchants and their wealth and power hinge on owning a live ship, which is a magical, sentient vessel that represents both capital and legacy. What's fascinating is how Hobb weaves together economics and morality. These families aren't just trading goods, they're fighting over inheritance, legacy, and survival. A live ship is both a priceless resource, a commodity, and a heavy burden. Add in piracy, slavery, and monopoly trade, and you have a vivid portrait of how wealth shapes lives. We have a real wide cast of characters that represent different facets of mercantile ambition. We have one who is fighting for her rightful inheritance, another one who is trying to understand power, and another one who uses economics as much as piracy to dominate. The Live Ship Traders makes economics personal. Trade and wealth aren't background details, they are emotional drivers. It's about the way money isn't just a number on a ledger, it's family, identity, and morality. Then we have The Sarantine Mosaic by Guy Gavriel Kay. And Kay doesn't write about bankers or merchants directly, but his worlds are saturated with the economics of culture. In The Sarantine Mosaic, mosaics and artisanship are more than art. They're cultural capital. Patronage, trade, and craftsmanship underpin the politics of the empire. Kay reminds us that economics isn't necessarily just about coins. It's about who gets funded, who gets remembered, and who controls cultural legacy. Trade and patronage sustain civilizations, and Kay makes that visible in a way that feels very human and very intimate. Now I'm going to talk about books and series that I really want to read, and there's another 5 on this list. So let's jump in. And these are in no particular order. So the first one is the Empire Trilogy by Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wurts. This is a series that's been on my list for probably about 10 years at this point. And this series shifts from classic epic fantasy battles to political and economic intrigue. The main character inherits her house and finds herself in a deadly game of assassinations, alliances, and merchant politics that decide survival. Why this one particularly excites me is because, unlike many fantasy epics, this trilogy treats trade and economics as the true battlefield. Power isn't who has the biggest army, but who controls resources and alliances. It sounds like the perfect demonstration of how economics underpins empire. Then we have The Baroque Cycle by Neal Stephenson. This is historical fiction, but it reads like a fantasy epic. I believe it's very philosophical, and a lot of people also consider it sci-fi as well. And it spans late 17th century and early 18th century Europe, covering the birth of stock markets, modern banking and currency. Pirates, alchemists, and philosophers wrestle with the new form of finance. This is the origin story of the systems fantasy novels often reimagine. Understanding how money became mythic in history makes it easier to see how authors like Parker or Abraham riff on those same ideas in their worlds. I think this is probably one of the series that I'm most looking forward to read on this list for that reason. Then we have absolute legend in the world of fantasy and writing in general, and that is Making Money by Terry Pratchett. A reformed con man is put in charge of Ankh-Morpork's Bank, which is a bank you'll be familiar with if you've read any of Terry Pratchett's books. What follows is a satire of the gold standard, confidence in currency, and the absurdity of financial systems. Pratchett exposes the fragile truth behind banking. It all runs on trust. People believe money has value, so it does. Lose that trust and the whole thing collapses. that's both hilarious and also very, very serious. And it shows how fantasy can tackle real world finance with wit, which is what you would come to expect with an author like Terry Pratchett. Penultimate series that I have on my list is The Craft Sequence by Max Gladstone. In this world, contracts are literally spells and gods are treated like corporations. Debt isn't metaphorical, it can actually kill you. Gladstone literalizes the metaphor of money is magic. He shows how legal frameworks, contracts, and finance already act like sorcery in the real world, binding, complex, often incomprehensible, but inescapably powerful. It's capitalism reimagined as urban fantasy. Sounds incredible. The last one that we have on this list for now, as there are many more, but these are the ones that I've been looking at recently, and that is the Vlad Taltos series by Stephen Bruce. This is an author that I've been wanting to get to for a while, but for some reason I just haven't started his books, but maybe we'll start here. And Bruce takes us into the underworld economy. The main character is a mobster assassin in a city ruled by guilds and moneylenders. The series isn't about grand banking institutions, it's about the shadow economy, brackets, loans, and protection money. It's a reminder that wherever wealth exists, an underground economy exists beneath it, or I should say alongside it. Bruce brings attention to the informal criminal networks that mirror official banks and guilds. It broadens the theme of this video. Economics isn't just banks and merchants, it's also the shadow systems that keep money flowing. So that's it, folks. Those are some of the books that reveal the hidden side of fantasy. Not just battles, crowns, and prophecies, but the banks, merchants, and trade systems that hold real, tangible power. What fascinates me is how each author approaches the same question. Who rules a fantasy world? The king with the crown, the god with the magic, or the banker with the purse? I've loved or really enjoyed the ones that I've read, and I'm eager to explore the rest on this list. If you know more fantasy novels where commerce, banking, or trade takes center stage, then do let me know down below in the comments. If you like this video as well, please do give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and I will see you in my next one. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe as always, take care, and I'll see you very, very soon.